Here is a question that linguists rarely ask, and almost no documentary has ever explored. Persian was the official language of the Indian subcontinent for over 500 years. Hundreds of thousands of Persian words existed. And yet today, the average Hindi speaker uses perhaps 200 or 300 Persian or Arabic words in daily conversation. Not thousands, not even hundreds of the most common Persian words. Just a handful. So the question is not, as most documentaries ask, how did Persian words enter Hindi? That story is well known. The real question is far more interesting. Out of hundreds of thousands of Persian and Arabic words, why did these specific words survive? Why Ishq and not most other Persian words for love? Why khoon and not rakt? Why yani, a humble conversational filler, cross a language border that thousands of more important Persian words never crossed? What was the filter? And what does it tell us about how all languages actually work? First, let us understand the scale of contact. For over 500 years, from the Delhi Sultanate in 1206 through the Mughal Empire and beyond, Persian was not a foreign language in India. It was the language of courts, of law, of literature, of administration, of trade. Entire generations of Hindu scholars, scribes, accountants and poets worked and wrote in Persian, not as a second language learned reluctantly, but as the language of professional life and intellectual ambition. And yet, walk through a Hindi conversation today. You will find dil, but not kalb. Both mean heart in Arabic and Persian. You will find ishq, but not muhabbat in everyday speech. Both mean love. You will find subah for morning, but rarely bam, also Persian for dawn. You will find mumkin for possible, but rarely muyasa, also Arabic for achievable. The language made choices. Quietly, collectively, over generations, it chose some words and discarded thousands of others. What drove those choices? There was no committee, no official list, no decree. Languages do not borrow by committee. They borrow by collective instinct. And that instinct, when you examine it closely, word by word, follows patterns that reveal something profound about how human beings actually use language. The largest and most revealing cluster of Persian and Arabic words that entered Hindi are words of emotion. And when you examine them closely, a pattern emerges. In almost every case, the Persian or Arabic word did not simply replace an existing Hindi or Sanskrit word. It filled a gap, a precise emotional shade that the existing word could not quite capture. Take Ishq. Hindi already had prem, love. It already had pyar, affection, warmth, love. So why did Ishq cross? Because Ishq is not the same as prem. Prem is love, steady, deep, devoted. Ishq is consuming, overwhelming, almost dangerous love, the kind that destroys reason. The Sufi poets used Ishq specifically for this intensity, the love of the divine that annihilates the self. When that word entered Bollywood songs and Hindi poetry, it stayed because 1 billion speakers recognized that prem and Ishq are not the same feeling. They needed both words because they describe two different experiences. The same logic explains gham, sorrow. Hindi has dukh, but dukh is ordinary pain, a stubbed toe, a disappointment. Gham carries a specific quality, a slow, deep, beautiful sadness. The kind the Sufi poets sang about at midnight, a word so useful for a particular quality of melancholy that Hindi absorbed it permanently. And majboor, helpless, compelled. Hindi has vivash, but majboor carries something vivash doesn't. The sense of being helpless, not through weakness, but through impossible circumstances. Main majboor hoon, I have no choice, carries a particular emotional resignation, a whole life's tragedy compressed into 3 syllables. Vivash never achieved that
completely
weight
different
in
cluster.
everyday speech.
Words of darkness, crime, and moral judgment. These cross through a different mechanism entirely. Take khoon, blood. Sanskrit has rakt. Both words exist in Hindi, but watch how they are used. A doctor says ract, blood type, blood pressure, blood test. A mother worried about her child says khoon. A poet writes about khoon. A Bollywood villain threatens khoon. Ract stayed in the formal medical literary register. Khoon took over the emotional, visceral, everyday register. The words split the territory between them, and each stayed because it owned a different emotional space. Qatl, murder, and qatil, murderer, entered through a very specific door, the Mughal legal system. For 5 centuries, criminal law across northern India was administered in Persian. When a murder happened, the official word for it was qatl. The perpetrator was a qatil. These words embedded themselves in the vocabulary of crime and justice so deeply that they outlasted the empire that introduced them. Hindi has hatya and hatyara, and both exist. But when Bollywood needed to write a crime drama, it reached instinctively for qatl and qatil. The words felt more legally serious, more dramatic, more weighted with consequence. And then there is harami, perhaps the most surprising word on this list. Its origin is Arabic, haram, that which is religiously forbidden or sinful. Harami literally meant one born of sin, an illegitimate child, a word rooted in Islamic legal and religious concept. And yet today, harami is used freely across Hindi by Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, as a general insult for a rogue, a scoundrel, someone behaving badly. The religious meaning was completely stripped away. Only the insult survived the crossing. The word became secular in transit. And that secularization is precisely what allowed it to travel so far from its origin. The third cluster is the most quietly remarkable because these words are not emotional, not dramatic, not dark. They are simply useful. And usefulness, it turns out, is one of the most powerful forces in language. Yani, from the Arabic yani, meaning, that is to say, a discourse marker, a verbal pause. Yani, what I mean is, it fills the gap between a thought and its explanation. Hindi has matlab for meaning, but yani does something slightly different. It is the word you reach for in the middle of a sentence when you want to clarify, to rephrase, to make sure you have been understood. It crossed not through poetry or drama but through sheer conversational utility, and today it is used across Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, and even in Indian English, effortlessly. Mumkin, possible, from Arabic. Hindi has sambhav, but sambhav feels formal, literary. Mumkin is the word of everyday negotiation. Kya mumkin hai? Is it possible? Can it be done? It found a home in the conversational register that sambhav never quite reached. Simple, short, easy to say, it crossed because it worked better in the flow of ordinary speech. And subah, morning, from Arabic. Sanskrit has prat, Hindi has savara. So why did subah survive alongside them? Partly because Sufi poetry gave subah, dawn, a spiritual significance. The morning hour was the time of prayer, of spiritual awakening, of divine proximity. But also simply because subah is easy, short, clear. The kind of word that settles into daily speech because it causes no friction whatsoever. The question we began with. Why did these specific words cross, and not the 95% that didn't? The words that crossed shared at least one of 3 qualities. They captured an emotional precision that existing words could not. Ishq, gham, majboor. They became secular, shed their religious or cultural specificity, and became available to everyone. Harami, khoon, qatl. Or they achieved conversational efficiency. They simply worked better in the texture of everyday speech than the alternatives. Yani, mumkin, subah. And notice what did not cross. Persian grammar never entered Hindi. The sentence structure, the verb forms, the grammatical logic of Persian, none of it transferred. Languages guard their grammar more fiercely than their vocabulary.
Hindi borrowed Persian words the way a house borrows furniture from a neighbor, selectively, keeping what fits, leaving the rest at the door. Most specifically, religious Arabic vocabulary also did not cross. Words tied intimately to Islamic practice, wuzu, namaz, roza, haram in its original religious sense, remained within Muslim communities. Not because of hostility, but because they described realities that had no daily relevance for non-Muslim speakers. A word earns its crossing by being useful to everyone who hears it. Here is what makes this remarkable. Sanskrit is one of the most ancient and sophisticated languages ever constructed by human beings, the mother of an entire family of languages, with a grammatical precision that stunned European scholars when they first encountered it. Tamil has a continuous literary tradition of over 2,000 years, poems and epics that predate most of Western literature. Neither language was diminished by the words they chose to borrow. They were enriched by them. Every great language borrows. English took from French, Latin, Norse, Arabic, Hindi. Mandarin carries Sanskrit in its Buddhist vocabulary. Persian itself borrowed from Greek, from Sanskrit, from Aramaic. Borrowing is not a sign of weakness in a language. It is a sign of confidence. The confidence to take what is useful, make it your own, and discard the rest. The words that stayed in Hindi stayed because 1 billion people, over generations, found them indispensable. Ishq, because no other word quite holds that particular fire. Khoon, because it bleeds where raqs does not. Yani, because conversation needed it. Harami, because, well, sometimes no other word will do. They stayed because they were earned, and a word that is earned never leaves.